Hello, gentle viewer. I decided I wanted to do sort of a second video series. It's still about comics, but it's instead of digging deep, analyzing, and spending time with editing and a lot of research, this is more off the cuff. This is basically just me giving a recommendation for something I've come across that I think more people should know about. In this case, I specifically wanted to talk about this book, Trashed by Derf Backderf. I guess you could call this sort of an independent comic. Certainly Derf, his career for over 2 decades, almost 3, he's been doing, a comic strip that's published in a lot of indie newspapers across the country. And he got a lot of acclaim a couple years ago for his autobiography called My Friend Dahmer, because he actually went to high school with Jeffrey Dahmer, who went on to become a serial killer. And that was a really interesting book because it's a slice of real life, and you're getting to know the person rather than just the story of who a killer was and focusing on those gory details. But anyway, this is his second full book, and it isn't technically nonfiction. It's what I would say is semi-autobiographical, because the author worked as a garbage man for about a year when he was either a late teenager or early 20s. And he's used those stories to inform this, where he's talking about, it's a slice of life story about a garbage man named JB. And that's sort of an allegory, an avatar, I should say, for the author himself. It's really, really interesting. It basically follows a full year, all 4 seasons, what a garbage man's life is like. And it's all, of course, based on true stories. So the people he encounters and the actual day-to-day work throughout every season of the year is documented in a very authentic, interesting way. I love autobiographical comics. I love reading about a slice of life that you might not otherwise encounter in any meaningful detail. And it is sort of a position that we almost intentionally don't think about for the most part. You know, we don't like to think about how much garbage we create and what happens to it. We just want to get that stinky stuff out of our house. But of course, it has to go somewhere. And Derf Backderf, in addition to documenting sort of a year in this garbage man's life, he gives a lot of interesting facts about how much garbage we produce in the US, where it goes, what happens to it, what composts, what doesn't, what percentage we create of all sorts of materials. You know, how much of it is food, how much of it is waste, how much of it is, chemicals or, machinery, things like that. It talks about, when it goes to a landfill, how does a landfill work? Exactly how much goes into it, and how do we protect the environment outside from all that toxic stuff that we're dumping. It's really, really interesting. It's funny, but it's also interesting. Here, I'll just open to a random page and show you. This is sort of the art style. It's definitely a little cartoony, but it's very clear. You can tell every character who they are. The characters are very expressive, and panel to panel, it's very clear, very easy to understand. So anyway, I don't need to go into too much detail without giving it away, but it's just over 200 pages. It's actually a fairly quick read, though, because it's really interesting and it moves fast. I found this tremendously interesting, and it's really making me think about how I consume things. Because I already live in an area, I'm in the Pacific Northwest, we recycle like crazy here. We have to. But before you even get to that stage, it's like, how much stuff are you bringing in that you really need, and it just makes you think. It's not like it makes you feel bad. It just gives you facts, and however you interpret that is up to you. But I certainly read this and started thinking about all like my friends that use something like, say, Loot Crate, and it's like so much of that stuff is just not even needed or wanted necessarily. It really makes you think, like, where does it all eventually go? Like, even just the packaging for it all. But that's just one random example. It's a fun read. I strongly recommend it. I've seen this in just about every comic book store I go into, but it's also on Amazon. It's published by Abrams Comic Arts. And again, the author's name, Derf Backderf. Highly recommended. Hope you guys enjoy. Let me know in the comments if you've read it, what you think about it. Thanks.